All right. In this part of the series, we will be talking about data visualization, specifically using the Python Matplotlib library. Now, what is data visualization? Data visualization is the graphical representation of data to understand trends, outliers, and patterns if they exist in the data. Now, why the graphical representation? It's because it's very hard for us humans to spot the different trends or outliers by simply looking at hundreds or thousands or even millions of rows of data, right? So what we do is to simply convert all that data into a visual form that we can make sense of or understand. Keep in mind, of course, that making or creating appealing or and understandable data visualization is an essential part of any respectable data analyst slash scientist. Okay, as we mentioned, we will be focusing on the Matplotlib library, which is a data visualization library, the same way that the Pandas library is a data analysis library. And when it comes to Matplotlib, there are two main approaches or methods through which we can create the different plots. The first one is the MATLAB approach, and the second one is the object-oriented approach. And throughout this demonstration or part, we will be focusing on the object-oriented approach for two main reasons. The first reason is that the object-oriented approach gives us much more uh, detailed control over the different plots we create. Okay, which means that it can help us to create much more efficient and appealing visualizations. The second reason is that by now we are comfortable with the object-oriented paradigm of programming, that is classes and objects, right? In the past, we have created so many objects from different classes, and we have tapped into the different attributes and methods under each one of those classes. Now, using the object-oriented way, we have two main parent objects that we need in every plot we create. The first one is the figure object, which is basically, or it simply represents the space or the canvas inside which we place the different plots. So in the same canvas or space, we can actually graph multiple plots at the same time, maybe a bar graph and a line graph. That's completely possible, right? Now, inside the canvas, we create the axis object. The axis object simply represents the plot along with its underlying components. Okay, and please make sure not to confuse the term axis with the plural of the term axis. Axis here simply represent the whole plot, not plural of the term axis. Okay, now inside each axis we have so many sub-objects, smaller objects, like for example the x-axis here, the y-axis, the label of the x-axis, the label of the y-axis, the text like 10, 12, 14, the title of the plot or the graph. All right, all of these components are parts of the parent axis object. Sorry. All right. Okay. Now, the steps to create any visualization using the Matplotlib library are very, very easy and simple. The first step is to import the submodule pyplot from the Matplotlib library. Just a second. So again, the first step is to import the submodule pyplot from the Matplotlib library and potentially use the alias plot for easier access later on. The second step is to create the parent objects we have talked about, which are the figure object, inside which we will place the multiple axes objects, and the axis object, which basically represent each a plot we create. And to do that, we use a simple function or method within the pyplot module called subplots, which basically returns two objects, the figure and the axis. After that, we can store both of these objects inside two variables. In this case, we can use, for example, the figure1 variable name and the axis1 variable name. In that case, figure1 will be a variable storing the figure object, and axis1 we will be will store the axis objects. This method is called unpacking, all right? And I'll leave it to you to read more about it or how you can use it in the Python language. The third step is to use the axis object methods to customize your plot. Remember, the axes represent the plot, right? And axis is an object, which means that it has been instantiated from the class axis, which contains a list of attributes and methods that we can use. So the moment we create an object from that class, we will immediately have access to the different attributes and methods. Now, what we do is to simply use the different methods in order to customize the appearance of our visualizations or plots. So, for example, we can use the plot method to create a line chart or line graph. And from there, we can pass the x-axis data, for example, days, and the y-axis data, which represent the different temperatures on those days. Another method is the set title, which allows us to set the title of our graph. For example, the week temperature report. Set X label. It allows us to set the label of the X-axis. Set Y label. It allows us to set the label of the Y-axis, and so on and so forth. So as you can see, we only have three simple steps to create any visualization we want. And this is just a beginner guide to create some simple plots or from which we can glean some insights, right? But later on, we will talk in more depth and we will be developing much more sophisticated plots. Uh, all right, so in the next part or tutorial, we will go over some simple plots and see how we can create them and what type of insights we can read off of them. All right, thank you for watching and see you later.